Shalom, everybody. This is Chris with firstcenturychristianity.net. Thank you so much for giving me 20 or 30 minutes of your day. Today, I'm talking about something that's kind of out of character for me. It's topics that I don't usually broach, but today it's talking about the New World Order. And this has been in my brain for a couple of days, maybe about a week now. And as the recent events have unfolded, I really just felt moved to talk about this topic. Subtitle is The Demise of Society as Seen on TV. So, since I've been an adult and hear people talk about things, they talk about the New World Order and think it is something that can be stopped or even something that you can see coming. And I wanted to talk about how in the past 40 years, if you stop and think about it, we've had a number of new world orders. We've had a number of foundational shifts in society, and I'm just going to touch on a few big ones today. But as I go through it, you're going to realize that wait a minute, that's right. And so in the past 40 years, I went back 40 because I wanted to start with maybe I should go back 45, but I want to start with the Berlin Wall coming down. As you won't, everybody thinks about the New World Order, a New World Order, or something to that effect, as always being bad. And when the Berlin Wall came down, it changed. It was a foundational shift in civilization for the known world. Until that point, we had an enormous foe in the Soviet Union and its communist satellite countries. We had nuclear weapons pointed at each other all the time. There were checkpoints all over Europe. There were countries that got gobbled up by the Soviet Union, atrocities that happened inside, and we had war games and always trying to play cat and mouse in the ocean with the navies and everything like that. And in a very short amount of time, that stopped and it brought in a peace and a prosperity that we didn't have previously. And previously, everything that both societies, the communist society and the free world, everything we did was centered around military and economic defensive positions and coalition building and trying to stop the bad guy. And all of a sudden, there was no more bad guy to stop, which allowed the world to experience a freedom. And of course, we always blow it. That's what mankind does. We continually blow it. But I wanted you to think about that because if you were alive during that time, as those of us who are Gen X were were young when that happened, but we should remember it and we should embrace it and celebrate it. One example of this new world order was when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait and 20 countries came together to expel the evil invader from the sovereign nation and restore order. Now, you may think that was good or bad, and there are always, two edges to every sword. Things can go both ways. But that was not a difficult decision for people to make back then. And Saddam picked the wrong time to do that because the free world had an enormous military might that we didn't need anymore. And so we were able to deploy and push him out very quickly. And then, a few years later, we have the cell phone and the internet come on the scene. And these technologies have, Dick Tracy and Maxwell Smart and, previous other science fiction things like from Ray Bradbury, Fahrenheit 451, they've always talked and imagined us having this technology where we could talk to each other from anywhere and we could talk and do video conferencing and stuff. But I don't think they realized that when we got it, how it was going to fundamentally change our society. Because today we have Teams and Zoom and we have the fourth generation of video conferencing and fiber optic internet, almost everywhere. And now with Elon Musk, we even have broadband internet through satellite wherever you may be. And so companies have a hard time scheduling meetings because they have people in 3, 4 time zones, and they have a very tight window when everybody can be online. We could share documents and work like you would never believe. Our productivity is absolutely through the roof. What I do for a living, because first century Christianity is a volunteer ministry. What I do for a living was impossible in the mid 90s. The way that we communicate with the computer systems and be logged into different servers and simultaneously moving, goods and services around the world. It would just be unthinkable back in the days of paper and carbon copies and stuff. And one place where this is kind of a bad thing and kind of a good thing is back in the day, you'd get the Wall Street Journal, you get the newspaper, and you wanted to see how your stock was doing. So you'd have to go and look at the little bitty stock ticker on the newspaper, see what it did the day before it. Everything was kind of slowed down and rational. Today, because of this technology, because the cell phone and the internet penetrate companies, they penetrate markets, they penetrate everywhere, our world is intertwined through these stock markets in a way that nobody really fully understands. The New York Stock Exchange has mechanisms built into it to where because there were people who were selling off so much in a day that it was depleting all these resources so quickly that because of automatic trades and things that were triggered, and they've had to put in stop gaps to actually shut the market down if it goes up or down in a certain percentage in a short amount of time. And this labyrinth of financial transactions today is dizzying. And if you think about it, if you spend money, now your phone is tied to your credit card. I don't do any of that, which goes through PayPal, which goes through, and all these different industries are making, fractions of a decimal of a percentage on all these transactions. It's just dizzying, and nobody can keep track of it. And it's not very difficult to see that this economic system that we have being very similar to that mystery Babylon thing in the book of Revelation. And then the next new world order I want to talk about was on 9/11/2001, and this is where Western countries legitimized military action inside of just about every country on earth to stop Islamic terrorism. And this was definitely a new world order, because while we experienced a ton of freedom after the fall of the Berlin Wall, we still had sovereign countries. And after September 11th, 2001, it became pretty obvious that sovereignty took a back seat to, not getting blown up at the store, not having another giant 9/11 go off. Which, in hindsight, you can't really blame people for reacting that way because it's such an awful thing happened. But privacy went the way of the dodo bird, and so did sovereignty. We have invaded so many countries now without declarations of war. In fact, going into countries with military action and police action, where the country itself is not even the target. It's just some bad actors. It's very, very strange the way that lasted for so long. But the Congress just took those war powers away. I think it was today they did that, or yesterday. I mean, it's 2023. It was 22 years after the towers came down, and we were still operating under those rules. It's unbelievable. But that was a new world order, wasn't it? If you think about the way that we went from thinking about the world, dramatically changed. Our freedoms, the freedoms to move and study and make money, were used against us. And that was a pretty strange set of events that came for over the next 20 years. Um, Now, the 2008 financial crash, and this is I was talking about a minute ago with the cell phone and the internet, but the 2008 financial crash is one where I raised an eyebrow, even in my super skeptical, brain, because, and this blows my mind, is that people defaulted on home loans in California and the Western United States That resulted in the nation of Iceland going bankrupt. Did you know that? The nation of Iceland had banks which had money invested in these pretend securities in the United States or wherever, and when that market, when that banking loan collapse happened in 2008, it it bankrupted that nation and severely damaged many others. Our government did the unthinkable at the time by printing $750 billion and injecting it into the banking system to stop a complete financial collapse. And just think about me. What I just said should have been an enormous amount of money. And how many times have we done it since then? How many times since that financial collapse have we had these huge financial calamities where they just decide to move money around and do stuff? It's astonishing, and it's another one of these systems that are so big that nobody really understands it. And the reason I'm bringing all this stuff up to bring us up to current day, which I'm working on, is to talk about Rome's demise and this concept we have of a new world order. And it's I think a lot of it has to do with our society's consumption of fiction, fictional books and fictional movies and Dan Brown movies, Tom Clancy movies. We think that the entire scenario has to be played out in a 90-minute, movie or a mini series, and we don't realize that Yahweh works in a very long time to us. The nation, the empire of Rome, and this may shock you, but when you think about it, you'll go, yeah, he's probably right about that, right? Rome was allowed to become an empire so that Christianity could be spread. It was a tool in order for the gospel to go to the known world. You had a couple of common languages, primary being Greek, secondary being Latin, and so when the gospel went forth from Zion, it went out. Yeshua died, resurrected, Holy Spirit comes down. The Holy Spirit comes down on the apostles, and then the apostles testify to a bunch of believers who had come from all over the known world, and they carry that testimony back to their synagogues. And then you get the Apostle Paul and you get the other apostles who are free to go to these places because there was an empire out there that they could travel within freely. And so Rome's demise took its build up. The Roman Republic it was before Yeshua, and then its demise was long after. Was It's a Yahweh ordained thing. And I was watching a lecture series on Rome, and it hit me as to how it came to be, how that empire came to have the power over Jerusalem, and how long it took for it to break apart into pieces. And brothers and sisters, it's not a 90-minute movie. It's not a mini series. We're talking hundreds of years for that empire to crumble. And it was time by Yahweh to pair with the rise of Christianity. Hundreds of years it took for that empire to be built up, to stretch from Western Europe all the way to the Promised Land, to Judea, and then allow Christianity to be developed inside of this empire is all part of Yahweh's plan. And when Rome fell, it gave way to a new world order where people were largely Christian. Now this wasn't the Christianity that you and I share today, but they did believe in God, and they believed in the Son of God, and they called him Jesus. And then you gives birth to the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, which were the Christian times where people were forced even to accept this religion. And then we come to the Renaissance, and then we come to the Reformation, and basically the Christian morality out of Rome's hedonism was birthed Christian morality, which survived until guess what? About 40 years ago. Because about 40 years ago is when the secular forces were just nipping, and all constantly chipping at Christianity and our faith in God and the Ten Commandments and the morality of one man and one woman, heterosexual, monogamous family with kids and a stay-home mom, and all of that was also started to die. It started to die in the 60s, but it was really well on its way to death in the 1990s. That leads us up to now, because our way of life, which is patterned after the Bible, but is also patterned after the Roman Republic, is dying, if it's not already dead, and it doesn't look like there's any way to turn this around. And I was talking at Shabbat the other day about these two series, these television series that we can now binge watch, and this is why I'm talking about the demise of society as seen on TV, because first was NCIS, Navy Criminal Investigation Service, the one with Don Harmon, is that his name? But the long running series, which was a lot of fun. And if you watch it slowly as it pans out, you don't really notice it. But as the cell phones come on the scene, so does the hedonism. And now they're having several NCISs where the old NCIS was with marriages and divorces and families and all these other subplots running, and the subplots today reference the fallen society that we live in. Another one is Midsummer Murders, which is a British murder mystery series that my wife really loves. And she loves the murder mysteries, and she loves British television. And we watched this one. It's a 20-year plus running series. And it started as Church of England, church-going family. The main character's wife sang in the choir of the Episcopal Church. And they were in villages, and they had a common morality. And as the show transgresses, it starts falling away, and they've replaced the main characters and the main sub characters now because the show is so successful, but the others have retired and moved on, and they replaced the God-fearing characters with atheistic characters. And the last show that we watched, they made a point of having the atheists be the heroes against two religious figures who were made out to be the villains. And they even made one, a retired minister, be a villain for his entire life, showing some awful thing he did before he even had a church. And the writers just completely went out of their way to destroy any faith one would have, to paint religion in such a bad light that you couldn't. Even the other minister in the series was female, which of course is pretty new on the scene. Female ministry is not really something that we see in early Christianity, or even for the next 1,500 years. We don't see this. It's pretty new on the scene. But they even made her out to be a villainous person, where for most of the show you thought that lady was the murderer, until the big reveal where it turned out to be the old retired minister was the murderer. And that's just awful. It's just absolutely awful that it shows this destruction of the normal nuclear family to a horrible representation of Christians who are conquered by the heroes who are atheists. And brothers and sisters, that represents a new world order. When the majority of the world doesn't even know to think about God, that's new. We haven't had that. We've had pagan religions and we've had Christianity, but we haven't had a secular world in that I know of. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. And this Wall Street Journal poll that just came out, which is why I'm talking to you today, because the poll came out and I read the Wall Street Journal, which showed exactly what I'm talking about. That in recent days, from, I don't know if they did 30 years ago or 20 years ago, but they've showed that the dramatic flatlining of any religion, it's dropped from religion being important to people's lives from like 75% to 30%. And patriotism has dropped significantly as well, to where we have a situation now where people are not loyal to God or country. And the family was disintegrated before that. So the three pillars of a society are God, country, and family. And all three of those pillars are in ruins in the United States and Western civilization today. That's a new world order. And it didn't come out of the blue. It came over decades and decades and decades. A lot of it was done to us by the Soviet Union. They wanted to destroy our society and they targeted that. And once the Berlin Wall came down, nobody was around to tell the Soviets, well, they'd started something that was largely on autopilot, and here we are. And we wonder why a school just got shot up by a guy pretending to be a woman, shoots up a Christian school that he used to go to. And this is an interesting, it's not interesting, it's a complete catastrophe because these mass shootings happen. And they happen by people who have acted out sometimes over the course of a decade. And they are acting out, crying out for help, and mutilating their bodies and doing all these strange things. Um, but our society, that with the three pillars are gone, has pushed this individuality and you can be anything you want to be to such a point that we've normalized the most depraved behavior known to mankind. We are beyond Sodom and Gomorrah at this point, brothers and sisters, and you know it. Pardon me while I take a sip of coffee. But we know that the commandments are all tied together. Theft, adultery, homosexuality are also tied to murder and idol worship. When this nation was, quote, Christian, in air quotes, you knew that the people next door to you, they may go to the Episcopal Church or they may go to the Presbyterian or the Catholic or whatever. You knew pretty much what they believed, and you knew that you were working off the same playbook. And we don't have anything like that today. In this society, some people's religion is Marvel Comics or any sort of an entertainment type life. There's Comic Con. There are people who they live their entire lives for reenactments and all sorts of things, and never once think about going to a church or picking up a Bible. And that is also a new world order. Because the reason we got the printing press was not so that we could print Terry Brooks novels or Clive Cussler novels. We got the printing press to print the Bible and leaflets and politics. And now we're at a point where society is pretty much lost. But you and I know that Yeshua died for us to have a chance at eternal life. That makes us value life. And we understand that sin is the transgression of the law, and that law brings order. And that's the order that we want. There is going to be a new world order. At the end of days, all of the earth's works are going to be burnt up, and we're going to have a new heavens and a new earth. And then we're going to have Yahweh's order. And we want everybody to be in that. We're not pacifists, but we know what shalom is. And we want our neighbor to know it too. We desire a peaceful and ordered society under our King Yeshua and his Father Yahweh. And a society and peace only exists with boundaries. And our society lacks them almost entirely. The word no, and nobody can be told no today except some. And here's another anecdotal story that I'll tell you. Um, from Careerland, and a previous employer spent millions and millions of dollars having to do an organization because of an audit, because of a couple of failed audits. And we had to go through all these machinations and reorganizing thing and putting all these, rules and automations and paperwork in order. And it was an enormous undertaking. And there were some bad actors who were at the head of it. And they just kept spending money and wasting time to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. And nobody would tell them no. And then I had a conversation with one of the directors, and I said, "Well, look, his director's complaining to me about, subordinates, about the problems." And I said, "Well, you're in a position to tell these people, no, we can't afford that. You need to come up with a better solution. This has gone on too long. You can tell them no." And the guy just stopped and looked at me and he goes, "Well, no is a hard word." And where are we in modern times where management can't say no on financial issues? So now it's not really hard to see why corporations can't say no to social pressures either. When we arrive at a place where the purpose of business is no longer to make money, right? Because a lot of these businesses out there are all about societal change or ecological change or whatever. It seems like making money is the second to hire another mission statement. Well, that, brothers and sisters, is another new world order. But this inability to say the word no has got to the point where we're in the kind of a Lord of the Flies type life. Lord of the Flies, for those who don't know, is a classic novel about some kids who are stranded on an island who come up with their own government, and it's very immature government. And Lord of the Flies, and how much chaos ensues from these children being in charge of an island. And today we have children who are grown adults and have never been told no. And their kids are coming up and saying they want to be, like Sally's coming up and saying she wants to be Johnny, and Johnny's coming up and saying he wants to be Phyllis. And the parents aren't just going, "Oh, okay, it's just a phase." No, that's not real. The parents are actually allowing these children to entertain these insane ideas. And then the children are becoming biological experiments. And the long-term effects of these changes on a child who's getting their puberty blocked, their hormones blocked, the long-term medical and social psychological effects are not known about this. And we know it's not going to be good, because when people do the transgender thing, they end up committing suicide at incredibly high rates, doing awful things, much like this person who recently shot up a school. But what about the long-term effects on a society that allows literally anything to go? And not just allows it, we are forced to celebrate and tolerate some of the most deviant societal behavior that anyone can imagine. It's really just outrageous and inexplicable to talk about this, but this is the order of the world today. The society is crumbled. The only place that one can be told no, because earlier I said almost no, is if anybody wants to stop the madness. If you want to step up and say, no, we're not going to let a man who calls himself a woman go to the restroom with little girls. We're just not going to allow that. Those are the people that get told no. If you're And if you get told no, if you're one of those, then you're classified as something monstrous and you're shunned. If you want to have normal societal boundaries that have existed across all cultures for the 6,000 years that this world has been in existence. And that leads us to the days of Noah. Because in the days of Noah, all of men's thoughts were evil continually. And that's on our televisions today, isn't it, brothers and sisters? Or our phones, or our computers, or our podcasts. It's everywhere. And this time we're talking about billions of people all over the globe. Now, when Israel fell into sin and they got cast out, they knew the way back and they knew who they were. Once they got back to Jerusalem from Babylon, they read the Torah and they knew what to do. And after the fall of Rome, the West got a common morality in the form of corrupted Christianity. Now that lasted from the Dark Ages through the Reformations all the way to roughly 30, 40 years ago. And now we've arrived at this Wall Street Journal poll where people don't identify with God or their nation anymore. That, brothers and sisters, is a new world order and one we've never seen before. Definitely not on a large scale like we have today. And what's the next stage? Because these things take hundreds of years to pan out. Do we see any repentance in the works? Is there some calamity around the corner that will motivate to repentance? I don't see it. And even if there were, is the knowledge of biblical repentance even widespread enough for the opportunity to do any good? You know, we see in the book of Revelation, we see a lot of religious figures in the end of days, and like false prophets and demons and the like. But how does that happen in a society that doesn't believe in an afterlife or a God at all? How does that happen? Is there some calamity right around the corner that's going to get people prepared to embrace a religion, particularly a religion that we've maybe never seen before? Because I don't believe people are going to wake up tomorrow and embrace a false Christianity. I don't know. I'm just asking questions at this point. But what I do hope is that the next calamity, whatever that may be, can cause people to reach out for true biblical repentance. And it's probably not going to be a lot. But today, as people look around at this mess, every time you turn on the news, there's another disaster, there's another poisoning of the earth, with these train spills, with methanol, some methanol cargo is under the Ohio River right now, I think it is. There's just so much awfulness going on that it just, as people start looking at it, we need to step in and say, you know what? This world is not the end of it. Let me introduce you to Yahweh. Let me introduce you to his son, Yeshua. Let me tell you about a better way. Because that's what we can do to set ourselves apart from the madness, is to embrace the Bible, brothers and sisters. And while we can enjoy our freedom to worship the way we see fit, in first century Christianity, with all the hedonism of the Roman Empire, awful things that they did, hundreds of thousands of Gentiles embraced the Messiah of Israel and came to the knowledge of Yahweh through his Torah and repented. They learned the Torah by going to synagogue every Shabbat, as recorded in Acts 15. They accepted Yeshua as the Son of God. Their names are written in the book of life. This is the path. And with society crumbling around them, people clung to Yeshua, whom they called Jesus, and Yahweh, whom they called God. And that's why we have the Bible today. This is how we separate ourselves from these new world orders, by accepting Yeshua as the Messiah and then acting on it. And I encourage you to join us as we continue to live and worship in the fashion of the first century Christians. And, here comes the advertisement. Next week, we're keeping the spring holy days. We're going to commemorate the death of the Messiah the way he meant it to be commemorated. We're going to get together and wash each other's feet on the annual day that happened. And we're going to celebrate the Passover just like the first century Christians did. And when we're going to keep the days of unleavened bread. While we can do this in the open and invite people, we need to do it. And we need to grow the knowledge of the faith once delivered to the saints with all this hedonism going around us. Thank you all for listening. Please drop by firstcenturychristianity.net. Feel free to share, like, and sign up for everything and help us spread the gospel in these dark days. May Yahweh bless you and keep you in the name of his son Yeshua. Shalom.